The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the church reception hall, crystal fragments scattering like diamonds across expensive Italian tile. Chen stood frozen in her black funeral dress, one hand pressed against her 7-month belly, the other clutching the divorce papers her husband had just thrust into her trembling fingers. "Sign them now," Derek Martinez said, his voice cold and clinical despite the mourners still filing past her twin sister's closed casket just 20 feet away. "I don't have time for your drama today." Maya's eyes burned, but no tears came. She'd cried herself empty at the hospital 3 days ago when the doctors told her Sophie was gone. Her twin, her other half, her best friend since they'd shared a womb, gone at 29 from a brain aneurysm that gave no warning, no goodbye, no chance. Behind Derek stood Vanessa Liu, his 24-year-old associate from the hedge fund, wearing a black dress cut too low for a funeral and a satisfied smile that made Maya's stomach turn. Vanessa's hand rested possessively on Derek's arm, diamond bracelet catching the light, the same bracelet Maya had admired in Tiffany's window last month, the one Derek said they couldn't afford. "Derek, please," Maya whispered, aware of her parents across the room, her father's face gray with fresh grief, her mother supported by relatives. "Not here. Not today." Sophie's dead," Derek interrupted, and the casual cruelty in his tone made several nearby guests turn to stare. "Nothing we do now changes that. But what does change is that I'm done pretending this marriage works. I'm done pretending I want to be tied down to someone who's let herself go, who does nothing but work at that pathetic museum for poverty wages." Maya felt the words land like physical blows. She'd gained 40 pounds with the pregnancy, her body swollen and unfamiliar. The morning sickness had lasted 6 months, leaving her exhausted and unable to keep up the appearance Derek preferred. Her job as associate curator at the Metropolitan Museum paid $52,000 a year, nothing compared to Derek's $400,000 salary managing investments for Manhattan's wealthy elite. "What about the baby?" Maya's voice cracked on the last word. "Your daughter?" Derek's jaw tightened. "We'll work out custody arrangements. My lawyer will contact you about supervised visitations and child support calculations. Vanessa and I want to handle this maturely." Vanessa stepped forward, her perfume, something expensive and cloying, making Maya's pregnancy heightened sense of smell revolt. "I'm sorry it has to be like this, Maya. But Derek deserves to be happy. You've been so depressed since the pregnancy, so difficult to be around. Sometimes the kindest thing is to just let go." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that Maya almost questioned her own memory. Had she been difficult? Had her grief over losing Sophie somehow driven Derek away? But no, she remembered finding the hotel receipts 4 months ago, the late-night texts Derek thought he'd deleted, the way he'd started working late every night after she announced the pregnancy. "I need time," Maya said quietly, her hand moving protectively over her belly where the baby kicked in response to her elevated heart rate. "I need time to process this, to find somewhere to live, You have until Monday," Derek cut her off. "I've already had the locks changed on our apartment. Your clothes are boxed up in the storage unit on 86th Street. The key is with the building super." He pulled out his phone, checking messages with the same impatience he'd show a boring meeting. "Oh, and I've closed our joint bank account. My lawyer advised me to protect my assets during divorce proceedings." Maya felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. The joint account held $8,000, her emergency fund, carefully saved over 2 years from her modest salary. Money she'd been counting on to prepare for the baby's arrival in 2 months. "That's my money too," she managed. "Derek, I need that should have thought of that before you trapped me with this pregnancy." His voice dropped low enough that only she and Vanessa could hear. "We both know you stopped taking your pills on purpose. You thought a baby would lock me down, make me into some suburban dad. Well, congratulations, Maya. You get to be a single mother instead." The accusation was so absurd, so divorced from reality, that Maya actually laughed, a broken, bitter sound. She'd been on birth control. The pregnancy had been as much a surprise to her as to Derek. But his narrative was already set, his justification already constructed. Across the hall, Maya caught her mother's eye. Linda Chen's face crumpled with new understanding, registering what was happening even through her fog of grief. She started moving toward them, but Maya shook her head sharply. Her mother had just buried one daughter. She didn't need to witness the destruction of the other's life on the same day. "I'll sign," Maya heard herself say, the words coming from somewhere distant and cold. "Give me a pen." Derek's relief was visible and insulting. He produced a Mont-Blanc pen, a gift from his parents for his 30th birthday, and Maya scrawled her signature across the divorce petition with shaking hands. The papers proclaimed irreconcilable differences and requested joint custody of baby girl Martinez, expected delivery date December 15th. No mention of Derek's affair, no acknowledgement of his cruelty. Just clean, legal language that erased 2 years of marriage and 7 years of relationship before that. "Smart choice," Vanessa said brightly, as if Maya had just agreed to sell them a car rather than sign away her marriage at her twin sister's funeral. "Derek and I are actually heading to the Maldives next week. A little getaway to decompress from all this stress. I'm sure you understand." Maya understood perfectly. While she mourned Sophie, while she figured out how to survive as a pregnant, suddenly homeless woman with no savings and a museum salary, Derek and his mistress would be lounging on white sand beaches, drinking cocktails, celebrating their freedom. She turned without another word and walked toward the church exit, her black heels clicking against marble with each step. Behind her, she heard someone, probably Derek's mother, Catherine, who'd never approved of Maya's middle-class background, say loudly, "Well, it's about time. That girl was never right for our family." The November air hit Maya's face like a slap. She stood on the church steps, watching black town cars idle at the curb, guests clutching funeral programs with Sophie's smiling face on the cover. Her twin had been an environmental lawyer, passionate and brilliant, working 70-hour weeks trying to hold corporations accountable for pollution. She'd died at her desk, Maya's mother had told her. Slumped over briefs for a case against a chemical company, a blood vessel bursting in her brain with no warning. Sophie had been alone when it happened. No husband, no boyfriend. She'd always said she was too busy for relationships, that there'd be time for all that later. Except there hadn't been time at all. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "Your belongings are in storage unit 247. Code is 8814. Do not contact Derek directly about anything, all communication goes through my office. Mitchell Stevens, Stevens and Associates, Family Law." She stared at the message, at the casual efficiency of her erasure. 7 years with Derek, 2 years married, 7 months pregnant with his child, and she'd been reduced to a storage unit and a lawyer's contact list. Another text appeared, this one from her bank: "Your joint account with Derek Martinez has been closed. Final balance, $0. 00. Please contact us if you have questions." Maya's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the church steps, her black dress pooling around her like spilled ink. The divorce papers fluttered in her hand, and she saw something she'd missed in her initial shock: a clause requiring her to vacate the apartment by Monday at noon, to make no claims against Derek's assets or future earnings beyond state-mandated child support, to agree to supervised visitation pending custody evaluation. She'd signed away everything. In her grief and shock, she'd just agreed to terms that left her powerless. "Miss Chen?" A voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Maya looked up to see an elderly man in an expensive charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "I'm Robert Huang, senior partner at Huang and Associates. I've been trying to reach you for 3 days." "I'm sorry," Maya said automatically, her voice hollow. "My sister died. I've been at the hospital, then planning the funeral. I haven't been checking calls from numbers I don't recognize." Robert's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I know, and I'm deeply sorry for your loss. Sophie Chen was an exceptional attorney and an even better person. But Ms. Chen, I need to speak with you urgently. It's regarding your sister's estate." Estate. The word felt wrong applied to Sophie, who'd lived in a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn and drove a 15-year-old Honda. Sophie didn't have an estate. She had student loans and a rent-controlled apartment. Miss Chen, perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private? Robert glanced at the church, where guests were beginning to emerge, heading to the reception at Maya's parents' house in Queens. My car is around the corner. I can drive you wherever you need to go, and we can talk on the way. Maya looked down at the divorce papers in her hand, at the phone showing $0 in her account, at the storage unit key number that represented the sum total of her possessions. She had nowhere to go, no money to get there, and a baby due in 8 weeks. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Robert's car turned out to be a black Mercedes with leather seats soft as butter. Maya sank into the passenger seat while Robert settled behind the wheel with the comfortable efficiency of someone accustomed to luxury. He didn't start the engine immediately but instead pulled a thick folder from his briefcase. Miss Chen, Maya, if I may, I need to tell you something that will probably come as quite a shock. Robert's voice was gentle but firm. Your sister Sophie didn't just leave behind student loans and a studio apartment. She left behind a trust fund worth approximately $1.2 billion. The number was so absurd that Maya actually laughed, the same broken sound she'd made when Derek accused her of baby-trapping him. That's impossible. Sophie worked for a non-profit environmental law firm. She made maybe $60,000 a year. She took the subway everywhere and ate ramen for dinner half the week. Everything you're saying is true, Robert agreed. Sophie chose to live modestly despite her wealth. But Maya, your maternal grandmother, Chen Liwei, was the daughter of Chen Yongjin, who founded Chen Manufacturing in Taiwan in 1948. When the company was sold to a multinational corporation in 1995, the Chen family trust was valued at approximately $400 million. Maya shook her head, trying to process information that made no sense. My grandmother died when I was 10. She lived in a tiny apartment in Flushing. She clipped coupons and shopped at discount stores. Because she chose to, Robert said patiently. Chen Liwei believed that wealth corrupted character, that her children and grandchildren should learn to work hard and live modestly. When she died, she left the entire trust to her twin granddaughters, you and Sophie, with very specific conditions. The world seemed to tilt again, reality reshaping itself into something unrecognizable. What conditions? Robert opened the folder, revealing legal documents dense with text. The trust was structured so that neither of you could access the principal until you were 30 years old. You could receive modest living stipends if needed, but the bulk of the money remained locked away, growing under professional management. Your grandmother believed 30 was old enough to have developed character and judgment. Sophie and I turned 30 in 3 months, Maya said slowly. Turned. Sophie turned 30 in 3 months. Exactly. Robert's voice was somber. Which brings us to the second condition. If either twin died before age 30, her share would pass to the surviving twin immediately, along with full control of the trust. The words hung in the air between them, their implications slowly penetrating Maya's grief-fogged mind. You're saying Sophie's death means I inherit her share? I'm saying that as of 3 days ago, when Sophie Chen died, you became the sole beneficiary of a trust fund currently valued at $1.237 billion, with full access and control. No restrictions, no waiting period, no conditions beyond basic fiduciary responsibility. Maya stared at the papers in Robert's hands, at the numbers that seemed to have too many zeros to be real. $1.237 billion. More money than she could conceptualize, more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes at the museum. I don't understand, she whispered. Why didn't Sophie tell me? Why didn't we know about this? Your grandmother was very specific in her instructions. The trustees were not to inform you of the trust's existence until you turned 25. At that point, you were to be told about the modest stipends available but not the full amount until 30. Sophie only learned the complete details 6 months ago when she turned 29 and the trustees gave her the preliminary information. 6 months ago. Around the same time Sophie had stopped returning Maya's calls as frequently, had become distant and preoccupied. Maya had attributed it to work stress, but now she wondered if her twin had been grappling with the shock of sudden, enormous wealth. Did Sophie access any of it? Maya asked. Did she use the money for anything? She took exactly one stipend of $50,000 to pay off her law school loans. Then she told me she wanted nothing more until she turned 30. She said she wanted to earn her own way, prove to herself that she could succeed without the money. Robert's voice carried respect and sadness. Your sister was extraordinary, Maya. She could have lived like a princess but chose to live like everyone else. Maya thought about Sophie's studio apartment, her sensible shoes, her second-hand furniture. Her twin had known about $1.2 billion and kept living on $60,000 a year, kept fighting corporate polluters on behalf of communities who couldn't afford fancy lawyers. The knowledge made Sophie's death feel even more senseless, more cruel. She'd postpone luxury, postpone comfort, postpone living fully because she wanted to prove something to herself. And then she died before any of it mattered. There's more, Robert said carefully. The trust isn't just liquid assets. It includes significant real estate holdings, commercial properties in Manhattan, residential buildings in Brooklyn, a private estate in Connecticut. There are also controlling shares in 3 companies, including one that your grandmother's brother founded in California. Maya's hands moved unconsciously to her belly, where the baby was kicking steadily, as if responding to her racing heart. Just 20 minutes ago, she'd been homeless, penniless, divorced, and desperate. Now she was being told she was a billionaire. I need to see my parents, she said abruptly. They're expecting me at their house for the reception. They can't know about this yet. My mother just buried Sophie, she can't handle anything else today. Of course. Robert started the engine, the Mercedes purring to life. But Maya, there's one more thing you need to know. The trust was set up with complete privacy protections. Your name doesn't appear on any public documents. All holdings are managed through shell companies and trusts. Unless you choose to reveal your wealth, no one needs to know about it. The implications clicked into place immediately. Derek had divorced her thinking she was nobody, nothing, a museum curator with no resources or power. He'd stolen their joint savings, thrown her out of their apartment, served her papers at her twin's funeral. All while assuming she'd be powerless to fight back, desperate enough to accept whatever scraps he offered. Does Derek know? Maya asked, her voice hardening. Does anyone know besides you? Only the trustees, and we're bound by strict confidentiality agreements. Sophie never told anyone except me, as far as I'm aware. Your parents don't know. Your husband, ex-husband, certainly doesn't know. Robert glanced at her with something like approval. What you choose to do with that information is entirely up to you. Maya stared out the window at Manhattan passing by, at the city she'd called home for 7 years, the city where she'd built a life that had just exploded. She thought about Derek's casual cruelty, about Vanessa's smug satisfaction, about the way they'd timed the divorce to coincide with Sophie's funeral for maximum devastation. Mr. Huang, she said slowly, I'm going to need a new lawyer. The best divorce attorney in New York. Someone who specializes in cases involving hidden assets and financial manipulation. Robert's smile was sharp and satisfied. I know just the person. Her name is Patricia Wu, and she's made several unfaithful husbands wish they'd never been born. She'll be delighted to take your case. Good, Maya said softly. Because Derek Martinez is about to learn that destroying someone at their lowest point is a very dangerous game. Especially when you have no idea who they really are. The reception at her parents' house in Flushing was exactly as miserable as Maya expected. The small 2-bedroom home was packed with relatives, neighbors, and colleagues of Sophie's, all eating egg rolls and sharing memories of a woman taken too soon. Maya's mother sat in the living room like a collapsed marionette, accepting condolences with mechanical politeness while her eyes stared at nothing. Maya found her father in the kitchen, methodically making tea for guests despite the tremor in his hands. Thomas Chen had been an accountant for 40 years before retiring, a careful man who'd raised his daughters to value education and hard work. Looking at him now, diminished by grief, Maya felt a surge of protective fury. Her parents had lost one daughter. They weren't going to lose the other to Derek's cruelty. Baba, Maya said quietly, using the Mandarin term she'd called him since childhood. I need to tell you something. He turned, and seeing her face, immediately set down the teapot. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Derek served me with divorce papers. At the church, right after the service. The words came out flat, but Thomas's face went rigid with shock and rage. He what? He's been having an affair. With someone from his office. He took all the money from our joint account, changed the locks on the apartment, and told me I have until Monday to move out. Maya heard her voice shaking despite her best efforts at control. I'm 7 months pregnant, and he's throwing me out. Thomas's teacup shattered against the kitchen floor, porcelain fragments scattering just like the champagne glass at the church. The sound brought several relatives rushing in, including Maya's mother, Linda, whose grief-stunned expression sharpened into focus for the first time in days. Derek did what? Linda's voice was barely above a whisper but carried the force of a scream. Before Maya could answer, the front door opened, and unconscionably, Derek walked in with Vanessa. They carried a sympathy bouquet and wore matching expressions of somber respect, as if they hadn't just destroyed Maya's life 2 hours ago. The kitchen went silent. Everyone stared at Derek, then at Maya, then back at Derek. The tension was so thick Maya could taste it. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, Derek said smoothly, moving into the living room like he had every right to be there. I'm so sorry for your loss. Sophie was an amazing woman. I wanted to pay my respects. His eyes found Maya's, and the warning in them was clear: don't make a scene, don't embarrass yourself, don't tell them what happened. But Thomas Chen wasn't a man who stayed silent in the face of injustice. Get out of my house, he said, his voice shaking with fury. Get out before I throw you out. Derek's mask of sympathy cracked. Mr. Chen, I know emotions are running high. You served my daughter with divorce papers at her sister's funeral. Thomas took a step forward, and several of Maya's uncles moved to flank him. You took all her money, threw her out of her home while she's pregnant with your child. And now you have the audacity to come here with your whore and pretend to care about Sophie? Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa's face turned scarlet. How dare you, she started, but Linda Chen cut her off. How dare we? Linda's grief had transformed into something cold and dangerous. You destroyed my daughter at her twin sister's funeral. You kicked a pregnant woman out of her home. And you think you can stand in our house and demand respect? This is between Maya and me, Derek said, his corporate composure slipping. It has nothing to do with any of you. Maya and I have grown apart. She'll be fine. Fine? Maya heard herself say, her voice stronger than she'd expected. You cleaned out our bank account. You locked me out of our apartment. You told me I'd get supervised visitation with my own daughter. You timed this divorce to coincide with the worst day of my life. And you think I'll be fine? Derek's jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. I'm following proper legal procedures for divorce. My lawyer advised me to protect my assets, which is completely standard. And supervised visitation was his recommendation, not mine. You're mentally unstable, Maya. Look at you, you can barely function. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that Maya felt reality waver. Was she unstable? Was her grief, her shock, her devastation somehow proof of mental instability? Our daughter saw what you did, Thomas said coldly. Sophie would have destroyed you in court for what you're doing to her sister. She was one of the best environmental lawyers in the state. You think we don't have lawyers too? You think we can't fight back? Derek's laugh was genuinely amused. With respect, Mr. Chen, Sophie worked for a nonprofit. I'm sure she was very good at what she did, but I have Mitchell Stevens representing me. He handles divorces for hedge fund managers, real estate developers, celebrities. He costs $850 an hour. No offense, but you can't afford to fight me. The certainty in his voice, the complete conviction that he'd already won, made something inside Maya crystallize into diamond-hard determination. Derek thought he was fighting a powerless woman with working-class parents and no resources. He had no idea what was coming. "You're right," Maya said quietly. Sophie did work for a non-profit. She chose to, even though she could have done anything she wanted. She met Derek's eyes, and the confusion in them was satisfying. "But I'm not Sophie. And you're about to find out exactly how wrong you were about everything." Derek frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out." Maya turned to her parents. "Mama, Baba, I need to go. I have some calls to make. But I promise you, Derek is going to regret this. All of it." "Where will you go?" Linda asked urgently. "You have no money, no apartment, I'll be fine," Maya said, and the confidence in her voice surprised even her. "Better than fine. Trust me." She walked past Derek and Vanessa, past the relatives still standing in shocked silence, and out into the cold November evening. Robert Huang was waiting in his Mercedes at the curb, and when she slid into the passenger seat, he handed her a phone, brand new, top of the line. "Patricia Wu's number is already programmed in," he said. "Along with my personal number and the contact information for the trustees. That phone is registered to one of the trust's shell companies. Completely private. Derek won't be able to trace it." Maya stared at the sleek device, at this first tangible proof of her new reality. "Mr. Huang, Robert, please. Robert, I need you to help me with something before I talk to Patricia Wu. I need to disappear for a while. Somewhere Derek can't find me, somewhere I can think and plan without him harassing me. Can the trust pay for that?" Robert's smile was conspiratorial. "The trust can pay for whatever you need. In fact, one of the properties you now own is a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side. It's been vacant for 6 months while undergoing renovations. I can have it ready for you by tomorrow morning." "I need it ready tonight," Maya said firmly. "I need clothes, toiletries, food, everything. And I need it all done without leaving any trail Derek could follow. Consider it done." Robert pulled out his own phone and began typing rapidly. "I'll have a team there within the hour. Is there anything else?" Maya thought about the storage unit holding her boxed-up possessions, about the key code Derek's lawyer had sent her. "Yes. I want someone to go to storage unit 247 on 86th Street and move everything to the penthouse tonight. I don't want Derek to have any leverage, any way to keep my things hostage. I'll handle it personally," Robert promised. "Is there anything from the apartment itself you want retrieved?" Maya thought about the apartment she'd decorated, the nursery she'd been painting, the life she'd tried to build with a man who'd never valued any of it. "No. Let him keep all of it. I don't want anything that reminds me of him." As Robert drove through Manhattan, making calls to set Maya's escape in motion, she stared at the new phone in her hands. This small device represented a lifeline, a new beginning, a chance to fight back against a man who thought he'd already won. Her first call was to Patricia Wu. The lawyer answered on the second ring. "This is Patricia. Ms. Wu, my name is Chen. Robert Huang gave me your number. I need a divorce attorney, and Robert says you're the best." "Robert's too kind." Patricia's voice was warm but businesslike. "Tell me about your situation, Maya." So Maya did. She told the story from the beginning, meeting Derek in college, falling in love with his ambition and drive, the slow erosion of their relationship as he climbed higher in his career and she remained stubbornly content with her museum work. She told about the pregnancy that had seemed like a blessing but became a burden in Derek's eyes, about the weight gain and morning sickness that made her less attractive to him. About finding the hotel receipts and the deleted texts and knowing, deep in her gut, that she was losing him to someone younger and thinner and less complicated. And then she told about the funeral, about Derek's cold efficiency, about the divorce papers and the drained bank account and Vanessa's satisfied smirk. About being made homeless while 7 months pregnant, about supervised visitation and asset protection and the casual cruelty of a man who timed his betrayal for maximum devastation. When she finished, Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Maya, I want to be very clear about something. What Derek did, serving you papers at a funeral, draining your joint account without warning, locking you out of your home, that's not just cruel. It's legally actionable. We can bury him in so many lawsuits he'll be in court for the next decade. Good, Maya said softly. Because there's something else you need to know about my situation. She told Patricia about the trust, about the $1.2 billion, about the fact that Derek had divorced someone he thought was powerless without realizing she was one of the wealthiest women in New York. Patricia's laugh was pure delight. Oh, Maya. Oh, this is going to be fun. Does Derek have any idea? None whatsoever. And I'd like to keep it that way as long as possible. I want him to think he's won. I want him and his lawyer to be absolutely certain they have all the power while we quietly build a case that will destroy him. I like the way you think, Patricia said approvingly. Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to file a motion to dismiss the divorce petition on grounds of procedural irregularities. Serving papers at a funeral is legal but demonstrates bad faith that we can exploit. That will buy us time. Second, we're going to file for emergency spousal support and access to marital assets. Your pregnancy and his draining of the joint account gives us grounds. Third, we're going to subpoena his financial records, all of them. If he's been using company money to fund his affair, which I'm betting he has, we'll find it. And the trust? Maya asked. Do we have to disclose that? Not until it becomes relevant to the proceedings. And with the privacy protections Robert mentioned, we can probably keep it hidden indefinitely. You inherited that money after Derek filed for divorce, and from what you've told me, you and Sophie didn't even know about it during your marriage. There's no reason Derek should benefit from wealth you discovered after he abandoned you. Maya felt something unfold in her chest, something that felt like hope and vengeance in equal measure. When can we start? Tomorrow morning. I'll have emergency motions filed by noon. Derek's smug lawyer won't know what hit him. Patricia paused. Maya, I have to ask, what's your endgame here? Do you want to save the marriage, get the best settlement possible, or completely destroy Derek Martinez? Maya thought about Derek's laugh when Vanessa spat out her cruel words, about the way he'd looked at her with such contempt, about the divorce papers thrust at her while her twin's body waited for burial. She thought about the future she'd been planning, a life as Derek's wife, raising their daughter in that apartment, making compromises and sacrifices while he climbed higher and valued her less with every passing year. That future was dead as Sophie. But something else was being born, something harder and stronger and absolutely unwilling to be destroyed. I want justice, Maya said finally. I want Derek to understand that cruelty has consequences. I want him to realize that the woman he threw away was worth more than he ever imagined. And I want our daughter to grow up knowing her mother fought back, that she didn't just accept being discarded. Then justice is what you'll get, Patricia promised. Welcome to the fight, Maya. You're going to win. After hanging up, Maya leaned back in the Mercedes's leather seat and closed her eyes. Exhaustion pressed down on her like physical weight, grief for Sophie, shock from Derek's betrayal, the overwhelming strangeness of learning she was a billionaire. The baby kicked steadily against her ribs, a reminder that she wasn't alone, that she was responsible for another life now. We're here, Robert said gently, and Maya opened her eyes to see they'd stopped in front of an elegant pre-war building on East 78th Street. The doorman was already hurrying forward, and through the glass doors, Maya could see a tastefully appointed lobby with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. This is mine, she asked, disbelieving. This is yours, Robert confirmed. The penthouse, anyway. The trust owns the entire building, but I thought you'd want privacy and security, so I've had the penthouse prepared specifically for you. No one else has keys except building staff, and I've already briefed them on your situation. Derek Martinez is not allowed in the building under any circumstances. Maya felt tears threaten for the first time since Derek had handed her those papers. The relief of having somewhere safe, somewhere that was truly hers, threatened to overwhelm the careful control she'd been maintaining all day. Robert noticed. It's okay to cry, Maya. What you've been through today would break most people. The fact that you're still standing, still fighting, is remarkable. Sophie would have fought, Maya said through the tears that were finally coming. Sophie never let anyone push her around. I was always the quieter one, the peacekeeper. But Sophie, she would have destroyed Derek for this. Then be like Sophie, Robert said gently. Take what she taught you and use it. You have the resources now. You have the power. Don't let grief or doubt make you forget that. The penthouse was stunning in a way that made Maya's breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, the trees bare and beautiful in their winter starkness. The furniture was modern but comfortable, clearly expensive but not ostentatious. There were 3 bedrooms, one already set up as a master suite, one prepared as a guest room, and one that Robert had obviously arranged to be converted into a nursery, with a crib and changing table still in boxes waiting to be assembled. I took the liberty, Robert said, seeing Maya's expression as she stood in the doorway of the future nursery. Your daughter will need a place to sleep in 2 months. I thought you'd want to start fresh, not use anything Derek picked out. Maya moved into the room, running her hand over the crib box. Derek had chosen their nursery furniture, expensive pieces in gray and white, gender-neutral and modern. She'd gone along with his choices like she went along with everything, afraid to rock the boat, afraid to assert her own preferences. Looking at the plain crib box now, she felt a surge of determination. Her daughter's room would be what she wanted, not what some man decided was appropriate. Thank you, she said to Robert. For everything. I don't know how to repay you for the kindness you've shown me today. You don't owe me anything, Robert replied. Your grandmother hired my firm 40 years ago to manage this trust. Part of my job is making sure her granddaughters are protected and supported. Sophie made it easy, she wanted almost nothing from the trust, just paid off her loans and went on with her life. You're different. You need help right now, and I'm glad to provide it. After Robert left, Maya stood in her new home, in this penthouse worth millions that now belonged to her, and felt the full weight of the day finally crash over her. Sophie was dead. Her marriage was over. She was homeless and pregnant and terrified. But she was also, impossibly, a billionaire with resources Derek couldn't imagine and a lawyer who specialized in making unfaithful husbands suffer. She called her parents from the new phone, giving them the address and assuring them she was safe, that she had somewhere to stay, that they shouldn't worry. She didn't tell them about the trust, not yet. That revelation would come when they could handle it, after grief had loosened its stranglehold enough to process good news amid the devastating. That night, Maya lay in a king-sized bed more comfortable than anything she'd ever slept in an apartment worth more than Derek would earn in his entire life, and made plans. She was done being the quiet twin, the accommodating wife, the woman who made herself small to make others comfortable. Derek had destroyed that Maya at Sophie's funeral. What he didn't know was that he'd also set free the billionaire heiress who'd been hiding underneath. The next morning, Maya woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the baby doing gymnastics against her ribs. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was. This wasn't her bedroom, wasn't the apartment she'd shared with Derek. Then memory crashed back, the funeral, the divorce papers, the impossible revelation about the trust. She was in her penthouse. Her building. Her new life. Maya spent the morning meeting with Patricia Wu in the lawyer's corner office downtown. Patricia was in her 50s, sharply dressed in a burgundy suit, with gray streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. Her walls were decorated with framed newspaper articles about high-profile divorces she'd handled, tech moguls, real estate developers, even a B-list actor who'd tried to hide assets offshore. I've reviewed the divorce petition Derek filed, Patricia said without preamble, sliding papers across her mahogany desk. It's full of holes we can exploit. First, he's claiming irreconcilable differences, but given the timeline of his affair and the joint account drainage, we can argue financial misconduct and adultery. Second, he's requesting joint custody but also supervised visitation for you, which is contradictory and suggests he's trying to paint you as unstable while maintaining access to your daughter for child support reduction purposes. Maya felt her jaw tighten. He told me I was mentally unstable. At the funeral, in front of everyone. Of course he did. It's a classic tactic, undermine your credibility preemptively so if you fight back, you look crazy. Patricia's smile was sharp. But here's what he didn't count on, you're not actually unstable. You're grieving your sister and processing a betrayal, which are completely normal reactions. Any judge will see that. What won't look normal is a man who serves his pregnant wife divorce papers at a funeral and then drains their joint account. What's our first move? I'm filing an emergency motion today for temporary spousal support and restoration of access to marital funds. You're 7 months pregnant and he made you homeless, no judge will tolerate that. Patricia pulled out another document. I'm also filing a motion to compel financial discovery. If Derek's been using marital assets to fund his affair, and trust me, he has, we'll find every receipt, every hotel charge, every penny he spent on Vanessa Liu. Maya thought about the Tiffany bracelet, about the Maldives trip, about expensive dinners she'd never been invited to. He makes $400,000 a year. Where does he get money for all that? Excellent question. Which is why we're going to examine his expense reports, his credit cards, his investment accounts, everything. Men like Derek always think they're clever enough to hide their tracks. They never are. Patricia leaned forward. Maya, I need to ask you something personal. Do you want Derek back? Because if there's any part of you that thinks this marriage can be saved, we need to adjust our strategy accordingly. Maya thought about that morning at the church, about Derek's cold eyes and colder voice, about the way he'd laughed when Vanessa was cruel. She thought about 7 years of slowly diminishing herself to fit into the space Derek allocated for her, of gaining weight and losing confidence, of accepting less and less while he demanded more and more. No, she said firmly. I want the divorce. I just want it on my terms, not his. I want him to understand that throwing me away was the biggest mistake of his life. Music to my ears, Patricia replied. Now, let's talk about the trust. Robert Huang briefed me on the structure, and it's beautifully set up for privacy. The key is that you inherited this money after Derek filed for divorce. It's not marital property, and unless he specifically asks about inheritance during discovery, we're not required to disclose it. Won't his lawyer ask about assets? Probably. But we can answer honestly, you had no personal assets beyond the joint account during the marriage. The trust existed in Sophie's name until she died, and you had no access to it. After Derek filed for divorce, you inherited. That's all true, and it's all we need to say. Maya felt something uncoil in her chest. So he doesn't have to know? Not unless you want him to know. And speaking as someone who's handled these cases for 20 years, the moment Derek discovers your wealth is a strategic decision. Do you want him to know now, so he panics and makes mistakes? Or do you want to wait until you've got him completely cornered? Maya thought about Derek's arrogance, his absolute certainty that he'd already won. She thought about Vanessa's smug satisfaction, about the Maldives trip they were planning. Let them celebrate their victory. Let them believe they'd destroyed her. The reveal would be so much sweeter when they'd already spent weeks or months assuming they were safe. I want to wait, she decided. I want Derek to think he's beaten me right up until the moment I prove he hasn't. Is that petty? Patricia laughed, a sound of genuine delight. That's strategic. And it's going to be absolutely glorious to watch. Now, let's talk about the baby. You're due in 8 weeks, which means we need to move fast. I want custody arrangements settled before you give birth so Derek can't use your recovery period to paint you as unable to care for your daughter. They spent the next 2 hours going over strategy. Patricia would file the emergency motions today. She'd arrange for Maya to undergo a psychiatric evaluation to disprove Derek's instability claims. She'd hire a forensic accountant to examine Derek's finances. And she'd make sure that by the time their first court date arrived, Derek's lawyer would be drowning in motions and evidence and legal maneuvers designed to destabilize his position. One more thing, Patricia said as Maya was leaving. You need to document everything. Every text Derek sends, every email from his lawyer, every interaction with him or Vanessa. Keep a journal of your mental and emotional state, it'll help counter his instability claims. And Maya? Don't engage with him directly. All communication goes through me. The moment you respond to his provocations, you give him ammunition. Maya left Patricia's office feeling something she hadn't felt in months, powerful. Not just because of the money, though that certainly helped, but because she had a plan, she had an advocate, and she had the resources to fight back against a man who'd thought she'd be too broken to resist. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Maya, it's Derek. We need to talk about custody arrangements. Call me." Maya stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. She wanted to tell him exactly what she thought of him, wanted to unleash the rage and hurt that had been building since yesterday. But Patricia's voice echoed in her mind, "Don't engage." Instead, she forwarded the text to Patricia with a simple note, "He's trying to contact me directly." Patricia's response came within seconds, "Forward all future messages to me. Do not respond. I'll handle it." Maya spent the afternoon setting up her new life. Robert had been true to his word, her belongings from the storage unit were already delivered and unpacked by an efficient team. Her clothes hung in a walk-in closet 3 times the size of the one she'd had at Derek's apartment. Her books filled built-in shelves in the living room. Her grandmother's jade figurine, one of the few possessions she'd kept from her childhood home, sat on the mantel of a fireplace she now owned. But it was the nursery that consumed most of her attention. The crib still sat in its box, unassembled, a task Derek was supposed to have handled weeks ago but kept postponing. Now Maya stood in the empty room, her hand on her belly, and made a decision. She called Robert. "I need a recommendation for an interior designer. Someone who can transform a room quickly and doesn't ask questions about budgets." "I know just the person," Robert replied. "Her name is Jennifer Park. She's worked on several properties for the trust. I'll have her call you within the hour." Jennifer Park turned out to be a whirlwind of energy and creativity in her early 40s, with an eye for color and comfort that immediately put Maya at ease. She arrived with fabric samples, paint chips, and a tablet full of furniture options, taking one look at the empty room before declaring, "We're going to make this space magic." "I want it to feel safe," Maya said, running her hand along the wall. "Warm. Not like some designer showroom. I want my daughter to feel love from the moment she comes home." Jennifer's expression softened. "I understand completely. Let me ask you some questions. What colors do you love? What was your favorite place as a child? If you could give your daughter any gift, what would it be?" Maya thought about her grandmother's apartment in Flushing, about the jade plants in every window and the way sunlight filtered through them, turning everything green and gold. She thought about Sophie's laugh, about the way her twin had always made everything feel possible. She thought about the future she wanted for her daughter, one where she was valued and protected and never made to feel small. "I want green," she said finally. "Sage green walls with gold accents. I want it to feel like a garden, like growth, like possibility. And I want photographs of my family, my parents, my sister, my grandmother. I want my daughter to know where she comes from, who loved her before she was even born." Jennifer smiled, already sketching on her tablet. "I can have this room ready in a week. It's going to be beautiful, Maya. Your daughter is very lucky." That evening, Maya sat in her new living room with takeout from a Thai restaurant she'd always wanted to try but Derek had said was too expensive. She ate pad thai from the container, her feet up on an ottoman that probably cost more than a month's salary at the museum, and called her mother. "Maya Bear," Linda answered, using the childhood nickname she'd thought was lost forever. "How are you feeling? Did you sleep okay? Your father and I are worried sick." "I'm okay, Mama. Better than okay, actually. I have a place to stay, a friend's apartment while they're overseas. It's safe and comfortable, and the baby and I are fine." The lies came easily, smoothly. She'd tell her parents the truth eventually, but not now. Not when they were still drowning in grief over Sophie. "That monster," Linda said, her voice hardening. "Derek called your father today. Tried to say you were being unreasonable about the divorce, that you were making things difficult. Your father told him if he ever contacts us again, we'll get a restraining order. Pride and pain roared in Maya's chest. Baba shouldn't have to fight my battles. You're our daughter. Fighting for you isn't a battle, it's what parents do. Linda paused. Maya, I need to tell you something about Sophie. Something I should have told you years ago. Maya's heart clenched. What is it? She knew. About Derek, about the affair. She figured it out months ago when you asked her for advice about whether you were being paranoid. She had one of her colleagues at the firm do some digging, nothing illegal, just public records and credit checks. She found the hotel charges, the purchases, everything. She was going to tell you, was planning to help you leave him before the baby came. But then, Linda's voice broke. Then she died, and she never got the chance. The revelation hit Maya like a fist to the chest. Sophie had known. Her twin had been trying to protect her, had been gathering evidence and building a case. If she'd lived just a few more days, if that aneurysm hadn't burst, everything might have been different. Did she tell you what she found? Maya asked, her voice shaking. No. She said she wanted to be sure first, wanted to have all the proof before she upset you. I only know about it because she mentioned to your father that she was worried about Derek's spending patterns, that some things didn't add up. Linda was crying now, soft sobs that tore at Maya's heart. I'm so sorry, baby. If I'd pushed her to tell me more, if I'd warned you sooner, Mama, no. This isn't your fault. It's not Sophie's fault. It's Derek's fault, and he's going to pay for it. I promise you that. After hanging up, Maya sat in the growing darkness of her penthouse, watching lights come on across the park. Sophie had known. Sophie had been trying to save her. And then Sophie had died, leaving Maya to save herself. But that was okay. Maybe that was the point. Sophie had spent her life fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, marginalized communities, environmental victims, the powerless against the powerful. Now Maya would fight for herself, for her daughter, for the life she deserved instead of the one Derek had tried to force on her. Her phone lit up with an email from Patricia, emergency motions filed. Court date set for next Wednesday at 2 p.m. I'll pick you up at 1:30. We're something conservative but expensive, let's remind the judge who has the real power here. Maya smiled, an expression that would have startled Derek if he'd seen it. It wasn't the smile of sweet, accommodating Maya who'd spent 7 years making herself smaller. This was something sharper, harder, forged in the fire of grief and betrayal and impossible inheritance. Derek Martinez had thrown away a billionaire because he thought she was worthless. In 6 days, he'd start learning exactly how wrong he was. And by the time Maya was finished with him, he'd spend the rest of his life regretting every cruel word, every casual dismissal, every moment he'd underestimated the quiet woman he'd married. The quiet woman was gone. In her place stood an heiress with $1. $2 billion, a ruthless divorce attorney, and absolutely nothing left to lose. Let the games begin.